Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going this fine Tuesday? Hope you had a good holiday weekend, and we got a little something to talk about. Got a little bit of news to sink our teeth into. Little bit of it's not anything hugely actionable yet, and we'll see if this ends up meaning anything in the coming years. So I'm not going to act like we just made some big move that is going to completely change the state of our franchise going forward. But this is nonetheless worth talking about. And I've said it before. We can talk about players, we can talk about coaches, we can talk about all these things that have to do with the Seahawks, and of course we do. But big picture wise, the person at the helm of the Seahawks, whoever it may be going forward, that's a huge deal. That's a big thing, and I don't think we can just brush that off just because the owner is not near the top of the list of people we think about when we watch the team play during the season. So this stuff is important, and I try to talk about it whenever we learn anything. And Jody Allen has something to say. So to catch you guys up, there's been a decent amount of talk this offseason from me and many others about what the Seahawks ownership situation is looking like going forward. And there's been some speculation, but there have been a few actual things based in fact that have come out in recent months. So first we had the report that the Paul Allen Trust dictated the Seahawks must be sold because Paul Allen wanted his resources and assets to go towards his more philanthropic. I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing that. You guys know what I'm talking about. Those endeavors. So he wanted the team to be sold. In fact, he dictated specifically the teams must be sold. And then we also found out a couple weeks ago that the teams would have to pay a 10% fee of whatever the sale price is to the city of Seattle if they sold before, I believe it was June of 2024. So those two things gave us what seemed to be a pretty concrete timeline. The Seahawks would be sold because Paul Allen dictated that they have to be, along with the Blazers, and that the Seahawks would not be sold until June of 2024 because the trust does not want to have to give 10% of the money to the city of Seattle. So seemed like we had a pretty clear picture of what was going to happen. Jody Allen says, not so fast. You're not going to leave me behind like that. You're not going to forget about me. You're not going to brush me over here. It's not that simple. So she released this statement. Let's go over it. As chair of both the Portland Trail Blazers and the Seattle Seahawks, my lifelong focus is building championship teams that our communities are proud of. Like my brother Paul, I trust and expect our leaders and coaches to build winning teams that deliver results on and off the court and field. And I do want to say one thing here when it comes to who the owner of the Seahawks is. The only thing I really care about when it comes to the owner of the team is basically what she encompasses in this paragraph. It doesn't really matter to me if it's Jody, if it's Elon Musk, if it's Jeff Bezos, if it's somebody I'm not even thinking of right now, if it's somebody that nobody's thinking of right now, whoever it may be. A Steve Ballmer, some people throw out, Bill Gates, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me as long as they embody the traits that Jody talks about in this paragraph. Now, it's a paragraph in a PR release, so I'm not going to say just because it's in this press release it means that we're good now, but basically she sums it up very well. As an owner, I want somebody who wants to win, and I mean win championships, not just win games. I want somebody who is going to be devoted to winning titles, somebody who is focused on winning championships, who wants to win, and is willing to spend the money to do that. But you also need to trust the people that you hire. My perfect owner would be somebody like a Paul Allen, somebody who was willing to spend the money, somebody who really wanted to win, somebody who was willing to do whatever it took to win, but also understood that they did not understand football on a high enough level to do it themselves, so they would hire people to do it. They would hire guys like John Schneider and Pete Carroll. They would hire guys like, well, Tim Ruskell. Not that that worked out perfectly. Mike Holmgren. And they let those guys do their thing. They put them in place. They gave them the power and let them build. And since Paul Allen got here, most of the building has been successful. Not as successful as some of us would like, but it's been more good than bad. So if Jody is willing to embody everything in that paragraph, building championship teams and trusting the people you hire to build those winning teams, then I just want to say this right now. I don't feel some burning desire, some extreme demand for this Seahawks team to be sold to another owner. At the end of the day, I just need the owner to do those things, and the rest should take care of itself over a long enough sample size. So that's cool. As we've stated before, neither of the teams is for sale, and there are no sales discussions happening. Now, again, I want to stress this. Just because she says this doesn't mean it's the case. As Seahawks fans, we have been getting lied to this whole offseason, and sometimes I tell people, like, we've been getting lied to a lot this offseason. I think it's time we stop falling for it every single time. I saw it with the Baker Mayfield stuff. I was like, we were lied to about the Russell Wilson stuff. We were lied to about the Deshaun Watson stuff. Kind of. Maybe not from the organization itself, but from people who claim to know something, when it seems very clear to me now that we never had any interest at all in Deshaun Watson, and that ended up being a positive thing if you look at what's going on right now. But we've been deceived a lot, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, there is value in deceiving people in a business like running an NFL team when you're trying to compete against 31 other franchises. It's not a bad thing to have people not know what you're doing, to have people think you're going to do one thing and then do the other. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I am saying, like, hey, maybe we should stop falling for it. I know I don't trust these people anymore. Maybe I trust them to do the ultimate right thing. That remains to be seen. They're going to have to do some work to convince me of that. But I just mean in terms of taking what they say at face value. Now, she does admit that the statement that the teams must be sold at some point is true in this next paragraph. A time will come when that changes, given Paul's plans to dedicate the vast majority of his wealth to philanthropy, but estates of this size and complexity can take 10 to 20 years to wind down. There is no preordained timeline by which the teams must be sold. So basically, this is where I say, kind of not too seriously, she's pushing back. She is saying, yes, the teams must be sold. So she is acknowledging the fact that the Paul Allen trust dictated the teams have to be sold. She is acknowledging that as fact. So we can now, as fans, comfortably say that is the situation that we live in right now. This team has to be sold at some point. But as for an exact timeline, Jody is saying, well, don't marry yourself to that 2024 date. Don't assume we're going to sell the team the moment we can without paying the 10% fee. And if she is willing to embody the traits that she outlined in the top paragraph, that's actually a good thing. An owner that knows they're going to be in place for a long time is more likely to spend the money needed to build a great team. So if that's the case, okay. Now, just because she says these things doesn't mean it's going to happen. She says that there are no sales discussions happening and neither of the teams is for sale. I think it behooves her to have us believe that is the case, whether or not it is true. But just because she is saying those things doesn't mean they're necessarily the case. So don't take this as some end-all be-all of Jody's going to be the owner for the next decade plus. And we'll get a new owner eventually, but it's going to be a minute. It's going to take this amount of time. It still could happen in 2 years. It's possible this thing gets done very quickly once the 10% fee is no longer in the picture. She wraps things up by saying, until then, my focus and that of our teams is on winning, which is, that's a statement that you would expect any good owner to make, whether or not it is true when they're making a PR statement. But it's it's kind of interesting that she would come out and say this. It's almost like she heard people talking about how, oh, we got a 2 year timeline, 2 year timeline, and the team is sold. 2 years, it's going to be off her hands. She can't wait to get this out of her hands. And then she's coming out and saying like, no, 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 it's not that simple. You're not going to get rid of me that easily. And when I say get rid of, I want to stress that's a jokey vernacular. I I'm not yet convinced that Jody Allen is going to be a long term issue for this team. I know that some people are very unhappy that she didn't move on from Pete and John at some point in the last couple off seasons, which I probably would have personally. I know that some people are really unhappy with us moving on from Wilson, which I personally, I don't. I think that's at least justifiable. We'll see if it ends up being the correct decision. It would not surprise me if we ended up looking back on that and saying that was the right thing to do. Time will tell. But regardless, I don't think we have enough information to say whether or not Jody Allen is willing to back her statements up. I don't think that we've seen enough evidence. Some people say that we have. They've seen what they need to see. Some people say that Jody Allen not firing Pete and John this last offseason was all the evidence they needed. And that may be so. But again, if she is going to be in it for the long term, that actually makes it more likely that this team is able to put themselves in a position to win titles. So hopefully, when the time comes in the next couple of years, whenever the moment is there, this team shows they are willing to go spend money, go write checks, and do whatever it takes to build a championship quality team. Because until that happens, we're just not going to know if means anything positive for us as fans. That's what I have to say about this one. It's very possible that Jody Allen is in it for the long haul, and I want to be clear about something. This could be a good thing because we've talked a little bit in recent months about how an owner who is prepping to sell is not really the owner that you want when you're trying to build a championship caliber team, because they're focused on other things. And one of their biggest concerns is going to be limit the long-term money so the team has malleability for the next owner. I think that's some people's concerns about why they're not yet marrying themselves to Metcalf for a long-term deal. Now, we have married ourselves a little bit to Adams and Lockett, but honestly, we're not that married to them after 2020, after the 2023 season. So there's some concern that maybe we're trying to not do any long-term contracts or any backloaded contracts because the team is about to be sold. That would make sense. But if Jody's going to stick around, then that's not the case. And let's say we follow the timeline that I'm hopeful on. The timeline that I think is optimistically the timeline for the Seahawks to get back on top, where 2022 is a down year, 2023 is the year where you show what you can do, and then 2024 is the year you go try to win a Super Bowl. Hopefully you draft the right quarterback, hopefully you draft the right center, the right linebacker, etc., etc., etc. That's the offseason. That's the offseason where it's time to go, okay, we need one more pass rusher, bust out the checkbook. Need one more offensive lineman, bust out the checkbook. Whatever hole you need to fill, you spend the money to fill it. If the team is really going to be sold in 2024, Jody's probably not going to want to open up that checkbook because she's going to want it to be the next owner's issue. That kind of messes up your timeline. That kind of, as a fan, it's unfortunate because then you're just sitting there like, wow, we've got this team that's ready to go win a title. If we could just go open the checkbook, but we have an owner that's trying to sell, she's not going to want to do that. But if she's planning to stick around for years after, then that should not be a hang-up. Then it should just be on the competency and ability of your front office to go recognize the holes, fill them, and the money should just be there for them to spend. So I think this is, honestly, I'm going to go ahead and call it pretty good news. It just depends on what kind of owner Jody Allen ends up being. All right, guys. I'm going to get out of here, watch the end of this Mariners game, and I'll probably be on stream later tonight. Might do a Seahawks stream Hope to see you there, and go Hawks.